Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Just waiting for a few more community to arrive. Welcome to our Ordinary Council meeting, 25th of July 2023. It's good to see so many community here tonight. I will ask the CEO to read item 1 with the recording and live streaming of council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All council meetings are filmed with both video and audio being recorded. Video is focused on a specific area, however, audio from the entire room is captured. In common with all narrative during council meetings, verbal responses to congratulations, obituaries and question time will not be recorded in the written minutes. By submitting a question, you consent to your question being read aloud at the meeting. The reasoning behind recording council meetings is to hold us more accountable and to improve the transparency of council's decision-making to our community. The full meeting is being streamed live on council's YouTube channel, which is the Alpine Shire Council, and will also be available on the YouTube channel shortly after this meeting.
Thank you. Would you all please rise? Alpine Shire acknowledges the Taungurung peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting today. Council also acknowledges all of the traditional custodians of the wider lands of the area known as the Alpine Shire. We also acknowledge those people who have contributed to the rich fabric of our community and strive to make wise decisions that will improve the quality of life for all. Thank you. Item 3, the confirmations of minutes from our June meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on the 27th of June 2023, as circulated, be confirmed. Could I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Janus, Councillor Kelly. Any comments on the minutes? No. Thank you. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Apologies. We have one apology tonight, and that is the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Keeble, had rather a nasty accident on the ski fields on Sunday and is still not surfacing, basically, but we send our best to him. Obituaries and congratulations, starting from Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of congratulations. I know across our shire over the last month or so we've had lots of changeover dinners and beginnings of new committees at some of our key community groups, in particular the Rotary clubs and Bright Lions Club was the one I got to earlier in the month. So just a congratulations to those who stepped up to lead those organisations, I think including yourself, Mayor, as the President of Rotary in Myrtleford. Thank you. And a general shout out that it's always great to join one of these organisations. They have a great program and timetable of activities and lots of events and community activities that they contribute to. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Nicholas.
Nothing from me.
Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you. Just wanting to acknowledge the passing of a long-time local, Tom Fry, who was an excellent contributor throughout the community in various areas like the golf club and the football club. Sad to see his passing, and condolences to his family.
Councillor Janus.
I just want to congratulate the new Australian citizens that we swore in this afternoon, 8 new families, new Australian families in our community now, and I wish them all well.
Good. Councillor Prime?
None from me.
None from you. Thank you. Declarations by councillors of a conflict of interest. I'll just go through this briefly. Councillor Keeble did declare a conflict in the community grants funding, which is 8.2.1 tonight. He is not here tonight. Also, sorry, they're up on the board?
Yep.
Oh, you've got them all up there now. Thank you. Now, because, and as Councillor Kelly just pointed out, there are a lot of community groups that councillors become involved in. One of the reasons they possibly become a councillor as well. If councillors declare a conflict of interest, then they cannot, in these two instances, in 8.2.1 and 8.2.2, which are events funding and community grants funding, if something that they are involved in, an organisation, comes up for a grant, then if they happen to be on the panel at the time, they leave the room and they take no part in that discussion. That also forms a situation where, when it comes to council to be voted on, they have to also excuse themselves under a conflict of interest. However, because so many of the councillors are on things, if all of them left the room, we wouldn't have a quorum. So therefore tonight, it may take a little bit longer for those that wish to stay for this part of the evening. We are going to call it out by line item, and those councillors that have a specific conflict of interest on any one particular item within that whole grant process, they will be excused for that. Councillors will then vote on that particular one, and then that councillor can come back in to vote on the majority of the grants. So I just want to make that clear. I hope that's clear. So that's why, if you see tonight, there's toing and froing and going in and out of the room, and I see my Sergeant-at-Arms in the corner over there who'll be bringing people in and out. I needed to make that clear. The other thing I need to make clear tonight, and that is the last 3 council meetings we've had, in public question time, we have a process whereby questions on notice are written into the council. Tonight is the night that we are going to not accept any questions that came in late. We have made this clear. The cut-off time, I believe, is 5 o'clock on the Monday afternoon. I did read one here that couldn't get there because they were at work. What I am saying to those people who don't get questions read out tonight, your questions will be answered. They just may not be part of the public question time in council. The other one, and this is a governance rule, and I'm putting people on notice tonight about this one. If you've put questions in on notice, in writing, you are allowed 2 questions. Please don't extend it out to 4 or 5. 2 questions. If you then come along to the meeting, those are your 2 questions. You do not have another option because our governance rules basically state, tonight we're not going to fly with that, but for future council meetings that will be the case. So I would really implore you to think seriously about the questions you want to ask, make them very specific so that we can answer them correctly. Other questions that you may wish to have answered, you can always either come through a councillor, and if we've got the answer we will give them to you. Otherwise, please use the online forum, which is info@, and there will be an officer or somebody within council will be able to answer your question. So I hope that's clear, and I'm basically drawing a line in the sand on this particular one tonight. Right, questions on notice, and I'll go through the written ones first, and then I will ask questions from the floor. We are not proposing to go down the track of some other councils in Victoria where they have a specific time limit on questions on notice or question time. Some councils have a 10-minute only question time. We are not considering going down that track yet. Question 1 tonight. This one comes from Kevin Granter and Dean Hurlston, who represent a business, I believe, called Council Watch. I'll read the question and then I will give an answer to it. Can Council please advise the dollar amount of cost shifting from state government they estimate they occurred in 2023 and 2022-23 financial year? The answer to this one is officers will get back to this Council Watch with that answer. I mean, it's not an answer that I can pick out of the air. And there is another council in Victoria that has done some preliminary work on that. It is a major thing that is happening throughout Australia where State governments are cost-shifting a lot of costs onto local councils, which is imposting on what we can deliver back to you. Question 2 tonight is from Leanne Boyd from the Bright Valley Development. After reading the property service document for the Bright Valley development, we see the proposed trenching for underground power looks to be very close to the roots of the trees of the Great Alpine Road. So in Leanne's letter, there was one question, but there was a paragraph that had about another 3 questions in it. So Leanne, tonight, question 1, the other 3 questions are basically encapsulated under one banner, and they will be answered for you as well. So question 1, is this and any other digging through the tree roots being considered at the moment in relation to protecting our trees, meaning will the trenching be conducted outside the tree protection zone? Do I have an answer, please, from Mr Rees, Director of Assets?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council will assess all relevant matters as part of the assessment of the planning permit application for the subdivision, including matters of trenching.
Thank you. The other one, and it's probably easier if I read your actual paragraph, I believe. Sorry, just bear with me. Oh, it's been translated into questions. All right, then. Basically, the question is relating to population density, what happens in peak tourism periods, which is a population density, and it's to do with what happens on a catastrophic fire day at that particular point in time. I think, Mr Rees, do you have an answer on that one as well?
Yes, Mr Mayor. For those three questions, they all relate to bushfire safety. And as you know, there's been a lot of community interest in bushfire safety of the Bright Valley development. As Council has done with the tree avenue assessments and with the soil toxicology assessment, we will engage the services of a bushfire expert to do a peer review of the process that has been followed. And we will follow, obviously they will produce a report as per the other initiatives, and Council will consider those recommendations and respond appropriately.
Question 3, actually it's a misnomer, is that question 3? Item 3 in the question time is from Kath Healy, Save the Gateway Tree Action Group. Both of my questions are related to the Bright Valley development. Question 1, will the density of the subdivision be reassessed by the CFA in the lots closest to the plantations so it sufficiently considers and answers the question if it does mitigate the risk of fire? I think that again is Mr Rees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Kath. All planning permit applications for subdivision that require referral to the CFA will be referred to the CFA. And as the referral authority for fire safety, the CFA will assess each application and make a determination on the matters it considers relevant and advise Council accordingly.
I think I'm correct here, Kath, in saying that the actual subdivision has not been ratified yet. So the lot sizes have not been determined, and that's part of the process in conferring with CFA. If they come back and say, no, they're too close together and they have to be larger, then that's the way it has to go. But at the moment, if any of you are looking at proposed plans for subdivision out in that area, they're not set in stone because we have really nothing in front of us at the moment to say, yes, that's good or bad. Okay. Question 2, also from Kath. Based on property service report, would it be fair to say that the third entrance that intersects our trees has occurred because the proposed Stacky Gully upgrade that was proposed to be finished by now hasn't occurred? and thus this road, as well as the interim flood mitigation suggestion, is the only way forward at the moment. Mr Rees?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The short answer is no. The subdivision design and staging that's currently being considered has been the developer's choice.
Right. Question 4 is from Richie Kreutzer. Question 1. The Alpine Shire on inspection indicated that the toilets and the disabled toilets needed to be DDA compliant and uplifted. I'm assuming this is to do with Toowoomba Hall. Yeah? Which sounds like a maintenance issue rather than a capital upgrade. Mr Rees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your question, Richie. Maintenance, under the definition, means repairing an asset or building to its original standard of amenity, whereas an upgrade means enhancing or improving the standard. And so by that definition, upgrading the standard to include DDA compliance means that it's defined as an upgrade, not as a maintenance item, which is slightly technical, but for the purposes of this particular matter, that's how we've defined upgrade.
I believe some of the questions from the floor will probably relate to this as well tonight. So bear in mind the questions that are being given at the moment. The other questions from Richie, and there are actually 2 questions, but I'll try and condense it into one. Basically, the tender costs involved for the toilet DDA compliant and the shower and toilets combining black and grey water.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think these are all good and relevant questions. As per the report this evening, the recommendation for Council to consider is to enter into a value engineering exercise, and what that would involve is engaging with stakeholders to work through what scope is really affordable and required to be delivered within the budget. And I propose that we were able to address these questions through that stakeholder engagement exercise in more sort of, I guess, intimate setting.
Right, thank you. So we don't have a final plan, is that what you're saying?
Correct. The next stage is to actually get a final plan and scope together, and at that point in time we'd be able to determine on a package-by-package basis what is actually affordable,
sure.
In conjunction with the community groups to ensure we understand what is critical for them, and then how do we go about delivering that within the available budget.
Thank you. I might just point out on this particular one too that councils in Victoria are advocating strongly to the state government when funding becomes available for flood mitigation or repair work or whatever. In the past, the state government have always maintained like for like, meaning that if you had a bridge that was made out of timber, that's what you got back again, which meant the next flood came along and it'd just get washed away again. That happened 4 times to one particular bridge down near Seymour somewhere. Councils have been advocating that, sure, let's make it so that it's much better than that. Let's make it so that it's going to be sustainable. Forget the like for like thing. Let's put something back in place that's going to be of benefit and not just get washed away next time in the case of a bridge. If you're in the room tonight or listening online and your question hasn't been asked, because that's the end of the questions on notice, as I advised earlier, if you have questions, they will be answered. We have your email address, so answers will be done. You've got another one?
There was a question 6 that did come in on time.
Oh, my apologies. There is one. Yeah, it was still written. It wasn't picked up early. My apologies. There is one last one. It's from Toowoomba Red Cross member, Pauline Whiffen. Could you please advise if remedial works... I have it written down here too. Could you please advise if remedial works as determined by the Alpine Shire to the Toowoomba Memorial Hall kitchen will be made, and will the kitchen then pass the government health standards in order for the likes of Toowoomba Red Cross and other users of the hall to legitimately use it for public catering purposes? I believe that's again to you, Mr Rees.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So just to confirm that the final scope of works will be determined during the value engineering exercise, which will involve input from all stakeholder groups. And if after that exercise the kitchen is included in the final scope, then all works will need to be approved by Council's Health Department in order to be compliant.
Thank you. I hope that answers the questions. Now, I'm going to open the floor to public questions. There's a microphone in front of you there for those that haven't been here before. If you'd like to ask a question, just please step forward in an orderly fashion and use the microphone. Comment. I just need your name and basically where you're from. And questions, I'm going to stick to the 2-question rule, so please. Anybody would like to ask a question, please come forward. You should have sat in the front, Mark. Might just have to turn it on, I think.
Mark Redmond, Toowoomba District Community Association. This is with regards to the Toowoomba Memorial Hall upgrade. In January 2021, Council was approached by the TDCA to support a proposal to upgrade the Toowoomba Memorial Hall aimed at building resilience and boosting the emergency preparedness. The upgrade would deliver improvements to the hall that would enable it to be used as a community-run relief centre, supplementing the Council's designated emergency relief centres. The announcement in May 2021 that Council had been successful with their $850,000 BRV grant application that would fully fund the upgrade was met with joy by the community. Expectations were firmed. The first upgrade priority in all subsequent design discussions with the Council has been installation of showers, toilets that would allow for a dormitory-style temporary accommodation for displaced community and or visiting emergency services staff and or possible overnight accommodation users. Second upgrade priority.
Mark, Council's aware of this. I think the community is probably aware of it as well.
Getting there, thank you.
Yeah, could we have questions, please?
The second priority was a rear covered deck. Third priority was disabled parking.
Sure.
Not one of these community priorities is listed for delivery in the report before tonight's Council. The question: Councils are now being asked to vote yes on a reduced budget, on a reduced project of maintenance and minor uplift works. How does the revised scope of works better protect the Toowoomba community in the event of another bushfire or emergency?
Right. Has Mr. Rees got an answer for that particular question, or would you like to put something in writing for Mr. Redmond?
Thanks, Mark. I think it would be preferable to put something in writing and take this on notice. As outlined in the report this evening, the recommendation is to go through a stakeholder-engaged value engineering exercise. That exercise will reveal the final scope that will be decided upon, and that will be an interactive, integrated process. So I think I would propose that let's go through that exercise, and that will then finalise the scope that's affordable.
Would a formal reply back to the TDCA be acceptable in this case? Engagement process.
This will be what we're looking for, thank you.
Sure, okay.
Second question, which may not be so relevant, but should the Toowoomba Hall emergency preparedness not be upgraded, what is the replacement plan for the people of Toowoomba and District?
Is that also... Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Rees.
Thanks, Mark. So I think this relates to Council's emergency management preparedness, and we have designated places of last resort and relief centres that have been identified. The community has been engaged repeatedly through that process. The initiative of the Toowoomba District and Community Association to take responsibility to provide local support has been acknowledged, and I think from an emergency preparedness perspective, this is probably better addressed through the emergency management team, and having an offline conversation to formalise that and reconfirm those arrangements will probably be the right forum for that discussion.
Thank you. I'll make a quick comment, but then I'll ask for other questions, and that is, in my time on council, every time council has looked at a building, a council building, or whatever, and decided to do an upgrade or whatever, it has always cost much more than what we thought. I think all of you there would probably agree, if you've ever gone and tried to do a renovation on your own home, you think it might cost X amount, but it ends up costing 1.5 or 2X, simply because of unforeseen circumstances, new building codes that have come in, and I think we're facing those problems now, and that's why the scope has probably been reduced. But there's going to be some more engagement. Good. Yeah, sure. Okay, please, just state your name and where you're from. Thank you.
My name is Julian Khan from Toowoomba as well.
Yep.
Council received $850 from the BRB for the Toowoomba Hall project, while the 2023-24 budget shows $200,000 allocated to the project. How much BRB money has been spent on the project to date, and on what, please?
Certainly. Can you answer that, Mr. Rees?
Thank you for your question. I would have to take the exact amount that's been spent on notice. But to answer your question about the amount that is reflected in the budget, what we do is the money is set aside for that project, and we allocate each year how much we believe will actually be spent on that project for that financial year. So the balance of the funds is sitting in our bank account and will be spent in the following financial year. And the reason why we anticipate only spending $200,000 this coming year is because the Bogong School is occupying the hall at this point in time. And once they vacate and we've completed the value engineering exercise, we don't anticipate we'll be able to complete the project before the end of the financial year. And so the balance will be spent the following year.
Thank you. Did you have another question?
Yes, I do. The BRB program's funding guidelines state that grant recipients must use the funding for the purpose granted, and that council's successful winning of the grant has been based on a proposal to deliver a community-run relief centre. Can you please release to the community the written proposed response from Bushfire Recovery Victoria approving the change in original objectives and the value engineering of the whole upgrade project that BRB is funding?
So probably two pieces there. One, we continuously work with funding agencies at the moment because many projects have been impacted by COVID-related impacts of supplier availability, cost exceedances like we have over here on this particular project. So we have a close working relationship with them. We've managed to negotiate extensions on funding agreements to enable works to be completed. And I guess during that engagement process, we'll continue to be transparent with the community to ensure that those funds are protected for the purposes of the project.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions tonight, please? Yep. Ray, would you like? Thank you.
My name's Ray.
Just press the button on the right-hand side down the bottom.
That's better. It turns green instead of red. Right, my name's Ray Dyer and I reside out Buffalo River. About 3 months ago, I think it was, I spoke about the trees around Myrtleford being cut down. And I believe you mentioned that it was state or government. You mentioned that the ones out the showgrounds, between the showgrounds and the golf club. Now, that's okay. You didn't state which state government. All right, I'd like to know that. But the trees that were cut down at the old Scout Hall, the Shire Chambers at Myrtleford, and Ruby's Milk Bar, you said that it had a very bad break in it and the tree was ruined, so it had to come out. I was driving up Prince Street the other day and there's another tree taken out at Prince Street right at the basketball courts between that and Prince Street Kindergarten. What's the idea of that?
Is that your
And they were monstrous trees too. Each tree could be minimum of 50 years old, the whole lot we're talking about.
So your question is,
My
what's
question
the
is,
story? Why are the trees being cut down?
why are the trees are being cut down? Another 2 monstrous trees have been cut down in Prince Street.
Right. You got an answer? I'll get the CEO maybe to answer this one.
Yeah,
Now, this shouldn't be a question as far as I'm concerned. I should have another 2 questions.
Well, this is a question, right?
Yes, but I've spoke about the trees before and it doesn't seem like anybody's
Probably got
listening.
an answer before and you're asking the same question again.
So perhaps if I could, there's 2 parts to this. One of the questions you've already asked, which we've already provided you an answer with, and we, myself and the Director Assets, met you in Myrtleford and we talked you through and we gave you a written response to your questions about those trees. So I'll park that for the moment because I believe that's been dealt with. And then you've asked a new question today about some trees on Prince Street, and we'll take that on notice and we'll do the same. We'll provide you feedback outside this meeting on those trees.
That's no problem.
Okay, now a question.
Now, I spoke, I think it was last month, about Mount Buffalo Chalet. What's happening with Mount Buffalo Chalet? I don't believe I got an answer full stop on that, one way or the other.
Again, the CEO.
Apologise if you haven't received an answer. Perhaps I could clarify. We continue to engage with the stakeholders to try and advocate for a future for the chalet. There's no further information that we're able to share with you at this stage, Mr Dyer.
When's the next meeting? And can general public go to that meeting?
So this will be that's your last question then. Okay. I don't know when the next, unless you have some information on that, when we are meeting with Parks Victoria again.
I can confirm there are no planned meetings.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mr Dyer. Now, I believe there's a gentleman in the back row there, had his hand up. Thank you. If it's green, it's on, I think.
Which isn't helping a red and green colourblind.
No, it doesn't.
My name's Mark Hardage from Toowoomba. This is to do with the Toowoomba Hall. Why did Council, knowing in April 2023 at the close of tender that the project could not be delivered within the grant funding envelope, not investigate the possibility for additional funding via the 2023-24 Capital Works budget to help address the shortfall when that budget was being finalised in May-June?
Mr Rees or the CEO? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question. I think as the Mayor reflected, there are a large number of our projects where we've got a significant delivery challenge. This is our externally funded projects, and typically all the building projects we've got a significant challenge delivering because of the cost of materials has gone up a lot and availability of contractors. So we've had a conversation with the councillors in relation to the ability to fund through Council's annual budget process and overrun on all of these projects. And to be able to fund all of the projects equitably across the Shire, it would be a very significant impost on Council's available funds. We've also explored with the funding agencies the ability to secure extra funds from these external agencies. And I think as we reflected, it isn't only the Alpine Shire that's having a challenge delivering projects, it's all of the Victorian Shires that are exposed to the same issue with materials. And the government agencies have said effectively, no, there is no opportunity to secure extra funds through the external agencies. So ultimately, through either the external route or the internal route, we do not have the ability to contribute the additional funds that would be needed to deliver these projects as originally scoped.
Thank you. Second question. That being the case, has Council investigated a phased project plan that would have seen some works undertaken in future years?
Yes, thank you. That is exactly the approach that we're taking on all of our building projects. So we're investing in the design development so that we've got well-scoped and contemporary costed staging. And with the Myrtleford Memorial Hall and also Toowoomba Hall, the recommended approach would be to invest in the design work and then deliver the stages sequentially in a configuration that creates the best value for each stage for the community, and actively seek funding as further and future funding opportunities emerge from state and federal government.
Thank you. Just a point on that, it's a very good point that you've made, and that is one of the things that council does do is to try and have what we call shovel-ready projects on the books here. In other words, they've been scoped, they've been designed. They may not have been costed, though, because costs change, which means that when a funding application or a funding opportunity becomes available, council is ready to jump straight into it. And as Mr Rees has just said, what council is currently doing on all of these upgrades, and I'll call them upgrades on buildings, is to make sure that the future of that building can be upgraded very easily, because what's getting put into place now is going to be in place so that any upgrades will be easily done. And so we're looking to have shovel-ready plans on the books here, ready for that type of thing. All right, good. Any other questions from the floor? Yes, please, come forward.
Maureen Hardage, also from Toowoomba. The 3-year-old playgroup were asked to vacate the Toowoomba Hall to allow for proposed works to commence, but instead the Bogong Outdoor Education Centre took up residence because of the landslip. 2 questions. Is the Bogong School Camp paying full hire charges for use of the hall? And is that money being deposited into the Toowoomba Hall bank account or the Alpine Shire Consolidated Revenue?
Thank you for your question. Mr Rees, thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. The Bogong School is paying a market-related rent, and the revenue or the money is being deposited into council's bank account, and that is the arrangement that's in place.
Okay. Part 2. Is the Toowoomba Hall bank account still quarantined at the same cash balance as it was when council assumed control of the hall? And if not, what is the current balance of that bank account?
Is that a question on notice?
I'll have to take that as a question on notice.
Would you mind supplying your email address to Mr Rees so that he could confer with you on that?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More questions? Yes. Thank you.
I was going to sit very quietly at the back, but Maureen just inspired me with a question about rental of the Toowoomba Hall. What's the situation with payment for the company doing the landslip work on the community centre in Mount Beauty? I hope the Shire is making something out of that, because as a facility, it's not really a community facility anymore. It's very difficult to use.
Yes. Does Mr Rees have an answer? He does have an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, we are again charging a market-related rent. We had some very productive discussions with Major Roads Victoria, and that arrangement is in place, and we are invoicing them on a monthly basis.
Thank you. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, John. Given the questions that we've had so far and the answers, my question only relates, well, there's 2 parts to it. The first one relates to communication again and transparency, and making sure that before you go any further with the Toowoomba Hall project, that the TDCA and the community of Toowoomba are invited to know exactly what's going to happen from now on and be there before the scoping.
So is that a statement or is a question whether or not we are going to communicate with you?
Well, the question is, will you communicate with us?
I think Mr Rees answered Mr Redmond accordingly earlier.
And the second part about it is, given that there is so much, I won't say misinformation, but difficult to obtain information on the Toowoomba Hall project, could council consider one of the councillors taking a motion to defer Mr Rees's recommendations to you tonight, so that the community have got a month to talk to Mr Rees and councillors as well on this project?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to leave that until we discuss that. All right, councillors can chew this one over during the meeting, and if we defer it and lay it on the table for a month, I'm not sure just yet, and I'll have to ask when it's being presented as to what more can be actually done regarding what the motions are tonight. All right, but let's see how the discussion goes on that one. Thanks for that. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We shall now move on to item 8, presentation of reports by officers, which is, and they've got 3 minutes to think about it, the Toowoomba Memorial Hall upgrade. Director of Assets, Mr. Alan Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a hot topic this evening. And I know it's of great importance to the community that we get this right. So this report relates to the Toowoomba Memorial Hall upgrade project. As a bit of background, the town of Toowoomba has provided short-stay accommodation for various youth groups, including schools and scouts, among others, travelling to the Victorian High Country. And over the years, travellers were initially accommodated at the Toowoomba Caravan Park and later at the Toowoomba Scout Hall. However, the Scout Hall fell into disrepair and travellers were then accommodated at the Toowoomba Hall. In August 2021, Council successfully secured $850,000 of funding for upgrade works, and the scope of the project included the addition of amenities, including showers and toilets and wastewater infrastructure, to enable the hall to meet building code requirements associated with the use of the hall for overnight accommodation. Following extensive community engagement to finalise the design and the user requirement statement, the invitation to tender was advertised in 2022. The tender evaluation process resulted in a final tender cost of $1.5 million versus a funding grant of $850,000. This is a gap of $660,000 greater than the project budget. As we've said this evening, Council have experienced the escalation of costs on all of our building projects in recent times, and we're not unique in this in Victoria. There are a number of issues that have caused some of this escalation. The first is the National Construction Code for overnight accommodation, which requires the installation of showers, an upgraded fire protection system and sewer system to be compliant for the use of the building as overnight accommodation. And the scope associated with this overnight accommodation has contributed the largest proportion of the tendered total project costs. And as a result, initially looking at that scope, the initial thinking is that the delivery of the overnight accommodation requirements are simply not achievable within this round of funding. In addition, during the design development, additional issues were identified with relation to the existing conditions of the building, which will need to be addressed first and as part of the first stage of the project. And these include defective stormwater, asbestos in the kitchen, a non-compliant switchboard, which is a common problem with many of our halls, with insufficient mains power for the current requirements of the hall, and the addition of disabled toilet facilities that currently do not meet the DDA compliance standards. The value engineering that we're recommending to determine the final scope would need to look at the remediation of some of the existing conditions as laid out and some upgrade works that have been identified. As we've experienced this evening, one of the risks identified with this challenge of the cost from the market being significantly greater than the budget we have available is that community expectations would not be able to be met in the existing budget. And so from a mitigation perspective, the recommendation for additional value management and community engagement to maximise the delivery of scope within the existing funding that is available would be the recommended approach. We've had extensive consultation with the community, and we would be continuing that in order to finalise the scope of stage 1. And as such, due to these current market conditions and the significant rise in construction costs, the intended project scope for the Toowoomba Hall to be delivered in one stage is simply not possible. And hence this evening, the recommendation is that Council notes the cost of delivering the original scope for the Toowoomba Memorial Hall upgrade and endorses a value engineering exercise to deliver the scope that is going to deliver maximum value for the community within that $850,000 funding envelope.
Thank you, Mr Rees.
I'll move that to get it on the table.
You will move that. Thank you. Councillor Nicholas, do I have a seconder?
Sorry,
Councillor.
I didn't hear your motion, Councillor Nicholas.
No, she's just moving the recommendations.
Here.
Oh, sorry.
To start the discussion.
And Councillor Kelly. Councillor Nicholas.
I'm going to start with the question for Mr Rees, given the significant interest from TDCA and Sue Ryder's specific question about community engagement as part of the scope of value engineering. Is that something that you envisage as part of that scope, or would the value engineering be done and then taken to the community for further modification?
So I think it needs to be a transparent process. We have a well-defined set of scope that has been used to obtain the market price through the RFQ process. And what lies ahead for all stakeholders is to work through those various elements of scope and collectively agree on what would be the most appropriate use of $850,000 as stage one, and then identify the extra scope that would be recommended for stage two.
Thank you, that's all for now.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you everyone who's come tonight to ask questions. It's been really useful to unpack where this project is at and also, I think, reflect a little bit on its origins. My reflection is that it wasn't a shovel-ready project. Indeed, there was no funding in the pipeline, and it was the opportunity that, unfortunately, a Black Summer event brings funding opportunities, and that was the opportunity available to this. We're certainly not immune to the broader economic conditions, and my reading of this report is that overall, the objective is to make the best use of the funds available. Just something in the short term, and a question for you, Mr. Rees. It is listed as one of our 10 places of last resort in the Alpine Shire, and I was just curious: has it had we've done different things at different places of last resort to get them to a certain standard. Has the Toowoomba Memorial Hall had the Wi-Fi internet comms link upgrade installed there that I know that some of the others have? Do you know the answer to that by any chance?
Perhaps through you, Mr Mayor, if I could. The Wi-Fi upgrade that's been carried out to other buildings is unrelated to their status as a place of last resort. A place of last resort is exactly that. It's the place that you go to when you have no other option whatsoever. So we don't have a programme for updating places of last resort because we're not intending to encourage people to go and spend time in a place of last resort. So I think it is a common misconception as to what a place of last resort is. It is the place where you are out of all other options, and therefore there is no minimum definition. It's just a place that is safer than being elsewhere in that town.
Got it. I see the point on the... typically there's a hub nearby or something where there is comms as a refuge sort of centre or a resilience centre, I think.
So, through you, Mr Mayor,
yes,
so there is a different definition of a community facility. There are only, I believe, seven of them are in Victoria, which are specifically designed for people to live out a fire, and they have a much higher specification, but I believe there's only 7 of them if you go on the CFA website across Victoria. So beyond that, if you park fire risk and you look specifically at community buildings, we have been upgrading community buildings to provide Wi-Fi access for better functionality for the community, but it is not related to their status or their ability to support the community through a bushfire event. Some of them coincide. So, for example, the Myrtleford Senior Citizen Centre, we've upgraded the Wi-Fi there, but it was unrelated to its status as an emergency centre. It was purely because there was seen to be a need and a request within the community. So it's providing that benefit if it was needed, but it wasn't specifically upgraded as part of its status as a relief centre.
I've learnt something this evening. I know at the last earlier this year at the Resilience Committee meeting there was discussion, and I can't think of the acronym for the service, but it was sort of seen as STAND. Thank you, Councillor Janus. As seen as some of the funding for that was out of emergency management style funding.
Any other councillors wish to make comment at the moment?
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Janus.
A question for Mr Rees. In relation to the hall, we note that I note here that it is has asbestos problems, disability toilet concerns, stormwater, a switchboard. Should it be used at all at the moment?
Good question.
Thank you, Councillor Janus.
Until these works are done?
So what happened, the trigger occurs when we start to upgrade the building and conduct works. Until such time as long as we do nothing to the building, it is compliant as it is. The trigger for fire systems and etc. are all related to the upgrade. When you start renovating a building, there are certain thresholds that are met in terms of augmentation or upgrade, and that triggers the building code and invokes the requirement for compliance with the new current building code standards.
But we've identified these as concerns within the building code at the moment. Have we? Have we not?
Yes, we have, and that's why we're recommending to address all of those compliance matters in a staged approach, so that we build resilience into the building by doing the basics and getting the first, I guess, stage and the fundamentals of the building addressed and compliant, and then seek funding for the second stage.
Yes, so there'd be some urgency to get these rectified, I would take it.
Yes.
These matters particularly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other councillors' comments? Certainly, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Mr Rees, with the $850,000 that's been awarded as part of the grant from Bushfire Recovery, is this particular grant one that if it's not delivered by a certain time frame, funds have to be returned?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. All grant agreements have terms for which they are, I guess, agreed, so a finish date. As we've experienced across Victoria with the impacts of COVID and the lack of availability of suitable supplies and materials, most funding agreements have fallen foul of those agreed dates, just simply due to availability and delivery schedules. So we've been working very closely with all of our funding agencies to renegotiate that deadline. And so far we've been successful to have renegotiated to enable the full delivery within, the delivery of the works within that $850,000. So at this point in time, there isn't risk for us to have to return that money at this point.
Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, I think we'd like to deliver exactly what we set out to deliver would be the most ideal situation. Everyone could agree on that, and as has been stated tonight, this isn't the only project that's come across these issues. So from tonight, if this was voted through, Mr Rees, the next step would be reaching out to the stakeholders first and informing them of that, and basically going from there and letting them know what the engagement process was. Yep. But also obviously being realistic about what's achievable, timeframe, budget, yeah, and that not everything might be on the table in the future, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Prime. Yes, that is correct. Not everything is achievable within the $850,000. So the next step would be to work with the community stakeholder groups to identify the best value that we can deliver within the $850,000 as stage one, and then package up the balance of the scope and seek funding in future for the delivery of that under stage two.
So I think as long as that's nice and clear to the public, thank you.
I think that actually does address Ms Ryder's query before, and I think probably better to get this through so that you can actually get out there and get things happening with the public and find out where the scope is actually going to be. So, all right, Councillor Nicholas, you have final say.
Yeah, you pinched my words again.
Oh, sorry.
Exactly what I was going to say. But also, just to thank you very much again to the TDCA and community from Toowoomba to be here. We have been building our community engagement processes over the last 4 years, and I'm confident that in this process of value engineering and building the Toowoomba Hall into a shovel-ready project that will be staged, the community will be engaged again and again to be sure that we're heading in the right direction. So I commend again all the comments that we've had and look forward to the vote.
Thank you. That being the case, I shall now put those two recommendations to the vote. Those in favour, please. Thank you. That is unanimous. Good debate. Item 8.1.2, Myrtleford Memorial Hall. Again, I think Mr. Rees. Anybody who would like to leave, please. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for reminding me. I forgot to say at the start, anybody with one of these things, would you mind putting them on silent, please? Thank you. You reminded me. That's good. Mr. Rees, Myrtleford Memorial Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to the Myrtleford Memorial Hall upgrade project, which has suffered the similar market cost escalations to the Toowoomba Hall. In terms of background, the hall was built in 1924 and has served as a cinema and dance hall for almost 100 years. The hall did fall into disrepair after a major roof leak caused significant damage to the timber floor. However, in 2018, a decision was made by Council to reactivate the hall, and subsequent successful funding applications have resulted in a total project budget of $1.048 million being secured. Through extensive community consultation, a scope was defined and a user requirement statement was used to define the scope that was put to the market under a request for quotation. The cost plan was then developed to define the scope, so we didn't go to market. We undertook a quantity survey before going to market because we anticipated that the scope might be excessive in terms of price versus the available budget. The quantity survey results has come back with a price of $2.2 million, which is about $1.2 million more than the project budget or the funding that's available. So the team have investigated what project objectives could be achieved and delivered within the available budget in order to maximise the benefit to the community. And this process has resulted in two options being identified. Option one, focusing on the Visitor Information Centre and external entry courtyard, and option two, minor works to the auditorium and external entry courtyard. Option one delivers a full solution for the Visitor Information Centre to support and improve the VIC experience and is within the funding envelope. Option two delivers limited works to the auditorium and makes concessions which include a low-quality entrance, minimum amenities, no heating or cooling of the space in the hall, and no additional spaces for the community use. It also does not deliver the full solution to meet the objectives of the associated funding and the revival of the auditorium to support the Creative Hub. Both options, however, do allow for the rectification of the stormwater, which is a major cause of rising damp and a risk to the integrity of the building in the longer term. From a risk perspective, the original project scope is not affordable, and the associated reputational risk and disappointment of the community, which we've seen with the Toowoomba Hall, is the same for this particular project. And the recommendation is to work closely with the community to ensure that they're aware and understand the opportunity to deliver the maximum scope for the value that we have and deliver this project in two phases. There have been a number of community groups that have been engaged in the consultation, and they're itemised there, including the Myrtleford Theatre Troupe, the La Fiera Festival, the Historical Society, Theatre and Music, Myrtleford Film Society, the VIC Volunteers, Crackpots, and the Neighbourhood Centre.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Janus. Councillor Nicholas.
It's not quite Groundhog Day, but it feels like it a little bit. And as has been mentioned already today, there's a lot of cost escalations that everyone's feeling. So this is the way we're managing. to still provide for our community. The Visitor Information Centre is really important. It's really important for the volunteers who give up their time to welcome people to Myrtleford and the Shire. And I think it's really important too that we look at option 1, because it's about doing the job once and doing it properly, rather than having a mediocre approach that we then have to patch up later on. So I commend option 1, and I had a question, but I can't remember what it is.
I'll come back to you.
Leave that to John.
I'll come back to you. Councillor Janus?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Rees, and a lot of the questions in relation to this have been answered previously, particularly with community consultation, and councillors have had some communication from some of those groups directly who stated that they wish to remain in consultation with the. A bit of a background, we all got excited when we decided that we were going to do some work on this, and it was going to be $240-something thousand, and we thought, wow, isn't this great? It's now gone up at least 10 times to that, 2-point-something million. And as we know, and people don't, I think they need to understand that the courtyard side of it is directly aligned with particular funding, that we can't say, well, we're not going to build some seating and lovely little things out there for people to talk and communicate and spend that money on the inside of the hall. It's directly linked. It has to be spent on that, and hopefully we can utilise that space, particularly in the better weather there. And of course, we're going to save money in not paying rent on our current building with the Visitor Information Centre. The Myrtleford Visitor Information Centre, I think, is very highly regarded within the industry. Yep. And I thank the volunteers, because it's all about the volunteers for that. And we know the costs of building everything gets got up. I got a bill today and it was called the sorry bill. Of course, the cost of the timber has gone up so much. They called it a sorry bill. So anyway, I'll have to pay that one tomorrow.
Or next week. Phase it out.
So this is a good thing. That hall was falling apart over the years. I remember taking my children there to the movies in the old seats, so. It's an historic building for Myrtleford, and even though the back half is not going to be renovated per se, I'm actually hoping it's going to be cleaned up and half that rubbish removed so that it's a fitter state. But it also lends itself to still being able to do some display, having some displays in there through some of the groups and some workshops, etc. So it's not entirely unusable at all. And new toilets and wiring as per Toowoomba Hall, etc.
Other councillors? Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr Rees, thanks for the report. I just wanted to clarify the funding for this particular project. I understand Bushfire Recovery Victoria, which I think is now a new name as well, but the prior agenda item was clear, the funding source. In this one, I think it's a blend of funding sources, and I think Councillor Janus has pointed out that some of that funding is actually dedicated to some specific scope. Can you just flag at a high level, who the funding sources are and whether there are any sort of other kind of scope items associated?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. I'm afraid I don't have those details at my fingertips. There are 5 separate funding agreements. I'll revert to you in writing to give you a breakdown of who each of those are and what particular scope is associated with each of those funds. But as Councillor Janus said, one of them is Creative Victoria, and there's particularly well-defined scope that needs to be delivered in order to comply with that funding agreement, and some are more prescriptive than others, but I'll provide that to you.
Thanks, Mr Rees. It sounds like you've got the syndicate, there'll be 5 letters to explain where we're at and possible extensions and the like.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we need to note here that the Memorial Hall was built in 1924 and buildings built back then are not necessarily the way we build them now. As Mr Rees has alluded to tonight, you know, when we're going to upgrade a facility, we need to do it at you know, the standards that they meet today with bits and pieces. And I think that we are lucky that we're able to get budget to deliver half of scope of works, which means that we can future plan for what comes next, more so than if we weren't successful at all. So I think we need to be very mindful that, you know, we've got a project and it's being started, the scope of works is happening, something can be delivered and it's leading the way to what happens next. So I think we just need to be really mindful, and this comes not just into this one but all of them, that, you know, when we are successful in the applications of these, and I think that our staff do an incredible job with the grant funding applications in order for us to get funding to start these projects. And I think it just leads the way into what the future scope looks like for this. So I think being able to deliver what it is that we've got with these 5 successful grants that we have is going to be a really big value add, because moving the Visitor Information Centre to this area, there's going to be a lot of high traffic, and it's a beautiful building, it's a historical building, and I think that keeping these treasures and keeping them as long and as best as we can is really important, and a unique experience with some of these that we can utilise. I think it's great.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Nicholas? Your question?
Yeah, I remember the question. It was, I understand that the Visitor Information Centre lease has been, where it currently is, has been rolled on. How much longer do we have?
Month by month, I think.
Or
it's month by month.
Month by month, thank you. So it'd be good to get on with it, though, anyway, and just pick up some of these points and pull them together. So we're going again for shovel ready for the next stages, and having a vibrant and interesting entry into Myrtleford with using one of our historic buildings would be absolutely terrific. Look forward to it rolling out.
Thank you. I'll put those 2 recommendations to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. 8.1.3, the lease of hangar at Site 14, Papunka Aerodrome. Again, Mr Rees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report relates to a new lease at the Papunka Aerodrome. In terms of background, the Papunka Aerodrome master plan was presented to Council at an ordinary council meeting in 2006. The land was acquired in 2008, and leases have been made available for a period of 10 years plus an option to renew for a further 10 years at a time. The commencement rent for each of the attached leases is $1,249.20 per annum and is calculated on a per square meterage basis for each site. In terms of risk to council, in the event that there is non-compliance with the lease, council always reserves the right to terminate the lease due to non-compliance. This is a reasonably standard arrangement, and having previously met council's obligations under the Local Government Act 1989, it's recommended that council approves the lease at an appropriate stage of the meeting this evening.
We'll move in a second there. Councillor Janus. Councillor Prime. Councillor Janus.
Thank you. Just a question. You may have received it on notice, I'm not unsure. Do they actually have to rent that facility for aeronautical purposes?
Thank you, Councillor Janus. I do have a note here in terms of the process that is normally followed. So an applicant normally contacts council to express their interest. They're often placed on a wait list due to limited hangar availability. Once a site does become available, the applicant is vetted through the Airfield Association, who make a determination about their suitability. And if they are deemed suitable, these candidates are then directed to proceed to the planning permit stage, with Council's planning team, and a formal lease is then created once planning permit has been approved. So I guess the short answer is I presume and rely on the Airfield Association to make the appropriate determination for the tenants at the airfield.
Just, conscious and wary of someone sneaking in there, putting a bit of toxic waste for 10 years. We've got to deal with it some other time. We're getting it at a cheap rent.
Thanks, Councillor Janus. Councillor Prime.
Well, I suppose we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but no, happy for this fund to go ahead. Thank you.
Good. Any other councillors like to make comment on these leases? No? Okay. Councillor Janus, any last word on toxic waste or not? No. Thank you. All those in favour of the two recommendations? Thank you. That is passed. We move on to the Director of Customer and Community, Ms Havercroft, now with community grants. I'm going to rely on you, Ms Havercroft, as to my page in front of me has got asterisks everywhere as to who leaves when. I hope you've got some format.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and prepare yourselves for musical chairs. So this report relates to Community Grants Programme, and the funding that we're recommending is allocated to specific community groups. But as you mentioned earlier, this does involve some people coming and going as we work through. So I can continue to work through the whole report. I've got one item that I wanted to pick out specifically around someone who's being allocated a grant which is in excess of the grant requested. But other than that, was intending to just work through the recommendations on the list that's presented to us.
All right. So in this first instance, we have a conflict of interest for
Councillor
Prime for the Dedarang Picnic Race Club. Councillor Prime is leaving the meeting at 6:13. Please make note, Ms Pike. Thank you. So do we need to go through full backgrounds of this? I mean, it's basically they're just grant applications and they're grant submissions that have been allocated.
So without Councillor Prime in the room, but although she's been in the room before to listen to this, the assessment is made up of a group of community members, councillors and officers. The officers take a first flush of making a recommendation to that panel to make an assessment about whether the grant meets the criteria and what their recommendation of the amount of any grant should be. That's then discussed, and the outcome of those discussions is what is being presented to you as councillors this evening to make a determination on. And the first one that comes before us is in Dedarang and relates to the Dedarang Picnic Race Club.
Thank you. Have a mover, please. Moved. Councillor Hughes, seconder.
Yep.
Councillor Janus, any comments?
Nope.
Thank you. Those in favour? That's passed. Thank you, Ms Pike. Councillor Prime can return at 6:15.
And next to run the gauntlet is Councillor Kelly.
Councillor Kelly, thank you. Councillor Kelly is leaving at 6:15.
Enjoy myself.
Thank you. We've been through the preamble. I think it's basically a vote. This is all on locations in other locations in the Kiewa Valley. Is that correct?
So this is a series of applications that have come in from the Kiewa Valley and from Mount Beauty.
Right.
So these are all of the applications and then the grant recommendations for these two areas.
Just for transparency purposes, not that it needs to be done, but Councillor Kelly's employer, I think, subsidises a lot of these events, and that's where he feels there's a conflict. So, could I have a mover and seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Prime. Seconder. Councillor Hughes. Comments? Any? No. Those in favour? Thank you. That is passed. Councillor Kelly can resume at 6:16.
Thank you, Mary.
Think of the exercise, Mary.
Would you like to just lean against that table over there, Maryville? Thank you. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Councillor Janice, you're next to leave the room, please.
Mr Mayor, I just need to inform Council I do have a second one.
In this group or in the second group?
Myrtleford RSL sub-branch, I'm a member.
Okay.
You're not on the executive, though, are you? You're on the executive?
No.
Then you should probably... Oh, okay.
Hang on, I'll march out.
If you could just bear with me one moment, I'll see if I can get them to update and then we won't need to... So if it's okay, Mr Mayor, I've amended the minutes to include the additional conflict that...
Yes, you can.
Councillor Dennis.
Would you amend the minutes accordingly?
Thank you.
Could I have a mover for the funding for the Myrtleford community grants, please? Councillor Prime, Councillor Kelly. Any comments on this while Councillor Janice is out of the room? No? All right. Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Councillor Janice can rejoin the room at 6:18. Yeah, a green light and a red light, I think. Any more conflicts in this group?
No, that's the remainder of the grant applications are now presented for the full councillor cohort. I just would like to draw the councillor's attention to the Bright RSL sub-branch Inc., which made a request for a grant of $3,675, and the grant that was recommended by the panel is in excess of that at $5,000. During the assessment conversation, there was a significant discussion about whether their application hadn't fully appreciated the cost of the PA system that they were proposing to support the work that they do within the Bright community. And the assessment panel felt that to help them get exactly what they are after to support Anzac Day ceremonies, etc., that we upped the grant accordingly. That follows a discussion related to a similar PA system which the Myrtleford group put in a request for. So we took their advice around how much these systems can cost, and the grant funding agreement will say up to $5,000.
Thank you. Now you have free rein to keep going with your background if you wish.
The only other matters really relate to the underspend of the community grants. So the budgeted amount for community grants annually is $80,000, and the proposed numbers in front of us this evening only get to $78,000. I know that number says $88,104, but I will get there. So there is a little bit of excess funding available, which a recommendation this evening is that the Chief Executive has the responsibility, the delegated responsibility to allocate out throughout the year. But unlike previous community grant years, we've also got an additional $50,000 for revitalising the environment grant. And through the assessment and the assessment panel, we only received 2 applications to take advantage of that grant. So there is $39,000 of that grant available throughout the year to spend. And again, a recommendation that the councillors provide the Chief Executive with a delegated authority to distribute those funds to relevant organisations that meet the criteria. And additionally, that we provide feedback to those that were unsuccessful. There's also some applications that moved between the community grants and the events funding, and when we get to the next report, there'll be some things that move from events funding into the community grants, and they're included in here as an assessment and have been recommended for funding. Which threw up some interesting conversations through the panel around how we handle non-for-profit community group applications in a more broad sense, and will probably lead to some conversations internally around how we manage that in future years. But this evening, these are the recommendations before Council this evening to adopt the remainder of the grant funds and to provide a delegation to the Chief Executive of the 2 sums outstanding there, and to provide a feedback and assistance to the unsuccessful recipients.
Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Hughes, thank you. Councillor Nicholas.
First of all, thanks to all the people, councillors, community members who contributed to the discussions and recommendations that we've got in front of us, and to the people who put in the applications. There's a lot of work behind many of those. But I have a question of Ms Havercroft about the Revitalising Our Environment tranche in particular. Is Alpine Shire Council intending to communicate with organisations that might be eligible for that funding, such as land care groups, sustainability groups, potentially committees of management that still exist? And then that's the second question: are schools eligible for that, to apply for that money?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. So to the first point, yes, we intend to write out to all groups that we think would be conducting business which is relevant to that grant. And secondly, that does include the schools where they have community gardens, etc., because we feel that that is actually one of the things that could really meet this grant criteria well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Hughes.
I had a community question coming to me just off the back of an application that came in that ended up not going through the system because it was put through as a budget item when we approved the budget. And the group are asking that because their request, I suppose, for community funding had been denied because of that purpose. Is there a way that they can ask for any form of funding towards something else that they might be able to benefit from in light of what has happened? And if so, what avenues they may be able to explore, please?
So in relation to community grants, Councillor Hughes, the first would be that there's $2,300 something that is at the discretion, depending on whether this carries this evening, of the Chief Executive to allocate out. So that is a route for them to request some funding for a specific purpose. And the same for if it's related to revitalising the environment, there is $39,000. Within this year, this is the funding that is available for the community to seek from Council. So it would be to bring forward something different next year.
It would probably fit within the residual. So
that's the route.
Thank you.
I'd just like to point out that Community Bank Bright also work in conjunction with the community grants people within council, and I note here that they've committed to contribute over $25,000 towards 6 of the projects that were submitted as part of that. So I think that's important to recognise. Any other councillors like to wish to make comments regarding? No, thank you. Councillor Nicholas, any last?
RSL at Bright get a really good system down
Yeah, PA system. We'll hear it from here.
Watching the reaction down.
Nothing? All right, let's put this last lot to the vote. Those in favour, please. Thank you. That has been covered off. Okay, 2.2, the event funding program, and I believe we have more conflicts of interest with this one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but perhaps I'll start with the preamble so that everybody gets to enjoy that before I evict people from the council chamber so that voting can take place. So very similar to the community grant programme, an assessment panel is convened following an officer's recommendation relating to the criteria within the event strategy, which sets the framework for how the events funding programme would work, and then an assessment panel considers that, and actually the discussions were really in depth in many cases, and then make a recommendation that you see presented to you this evening. And so there are some groups that have been unsuccessful who will receive letters as well, and there is many groups that will receive funding subject to the recommendations this evening. So unlike community grants, the events funding has $200,000 allocated to it in the budget for 23-24, and they also benefit from any rollover from previous years. And during the COVID years, we didn't have our full complement of events running, and so that stands at about $90,000 this year, which we expect will make the full amount that would be available for events. And so this doesn't cover all of that money right now, but similarly to the community grants, we hope that events will come forward throughout the year that are new to the Shire, so we can support them as the year progresses. Probably some things to note that we're running 2 dinner plane events funding rounds this year. So we've taken lots of feedback that the middle of winter is a pretty dreadful time for dinner plane to be really thinking about what they would like for the following seasons. So reflective of that, we did have some applications for dinner plane this time, and we'll do a big push in November, September, October, November time, so a broad open period for additional dinner plane applications again into the year. They have their own funding allocation, which is secured for dinner plane residents and for dinner plane commercial tourist events up there, and is funded from the dinner plane special rate. So it's funded from a different source, and we hope that people will take advantage of that because it's often quite poorly subscribed, and council is then in a position where we're facilitating and carrying out those events on our own. It would be wonderful if we could get some community groups or event organisers to be running them up there as well. So hopefully having 2 separate event funding rounds will help groups take part. The sponsorship requests that we received totaled $217,000 this year, which is really reflective of, we've got a couple of new events in there, but also some of our old favourites coming back post-COVID, which is really good to see. We've also had some mergers of events where there's a lack of volunteers to keep events running, and so they've taken the opportunity to merge where they can to bring an event forward, which is reflective of conversations the councillor group have had in the past about supporting local community groups and events so that they can take place, and how hard it is to keep volunteers motivated to take part. There's a big ask of people. So the total recommendation this evening is an allocation of $160,000, and reflective that the total budget may be somewhere near $290,000. There is scope for additional events to be brought forward and funded as the year progresses.
Can I just have a point of clarity before we do anything first? That is recommendation 4. If you could just flip to that, please. Which is probably right at the end of the page now because of everything else.
It's now recommendation 7.
No, hang on. Council allocates funding community group.
I think it's 7.
It's 7? Yes, okay. That's 7, the funds totalling 90,000. Should we actually state specifically that 60,000 of that is actually quarantined for dinner plane? Because I believe that that's part of that 90, isn't it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Or is it separate?
It's separate. It's separate funding, yes.
Thank you. All right. Good. Right, in that case, let's go
Shall I
back to the
commence
start.
evicting people?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Councillor Hughes, is it okay if you are the first to leave?
Councillor Hughes is leaving at 6:30. Sorry? With escort, yes. Okay, recommendation allocates the funding for the events following in the location Brighton surrounds. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Janus, Councillor Prime. Any comments? No comments. Those in favour?
Sorry, Mayor, one question.
One question, certainly.
If I may. In reviewing the proposed allocations, I did take a look at the event strategy, and I was wondering if someone could, perhaps Ms Havercroft, explain. My understanding is we have, in our event strategy, we've got sort of large-scale events, medium to large, and then smaller scale, and there's some proposed kind of dollar signs or value grant, successful grant amounts that we consider as a council for those different categories of events. The large-scale one is a national event or of great significance, attracts a big crowd, and our event strategy states that we'll grant through this process up to $10,000 for up to a 3-year period. So, you know, on 3 occasions that event may receive up to $10,000. I was just trying to, and so that caused me to go back through history a little bit, and I share your reflection on the pause of events there for a year or so during pandemic years. The Bright's Iconic Rod Run, we're proposing a $10,000 application or grant to that event this year. Will that make it the 3rd time it has received that allocation, or is this the 2nd?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
If we don't know the question off the top of our head, I guess one thing that, whatever the answer is, I think it's important that we do communicate that in terms of, you know, you've been successful, but this is 3 times an out, or, do you know what I mean? I guess I'm curious as to how many times, but also whether we inform the applicant of their status under our event strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. So to the first point, we've taken the 1st of July 2022 as the implementation date for the event strategy. So that was the first year that they received $10,000 under the new auspices of the event strategy. So this will be entering their 2nd year of funding at that level. And we've agreed that for anyone who's in that position, and there are a few in that seat, that it will be clearly marked on the front page of their funding agreement that they're in 2 of 3 or 1 of 3, if that's the position that we're in.
Terrific, thank you.
Next question. Okay, anything else? No? Those in favour, please. Thank you, that's carried. Councillor Hughes can rejoin at 6:33. Thank you. Councillor Prime is leaving at 6:33. Deterang picnic races, allocated tier 2, I believe. Those in... Oh, sorry, can I have a mover and seconder? Yes. Councillor Janus, Councillor Kelly, any comments?
No.
Councillor Kelly? No. Any other comments? No. Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. That is carried. Councillor Prime is rejoining at 6:34.
Can you leave and join in the same moment?
Kelly is leaving.
And Councillor Kelly is leaving at 6:34.
Well done, Simon.
And I'm assuming...
Here we go, let's go.
Sorry?
You want to take an opportunity.
Oh, okay. Do you want longer? Okay. Councillor Prime has not rejoined the meeting. Sorry? We've got a quorum. Councillor Prime has rejoined the meeting at 6:34.
Running.
Okay, this is relating to the allocating of funding in events in the Mount Beauty area. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Happy to. Okay, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Prime, any comments?
No.
Right, any other comments from anybody? Other councillors? No. Those in favour? Thank you, that is carried. Councillor Kelly has rejoined at 6:35. Are the rest free?
The rest are for the quorum to determine.
Thank you.
The recommendations are the remainder of the recommended event funding amounts and it's quite a lot, that Council allocates funding to 2 community grant applications under the event funding programme, being the Mount Beauty Community Markets as Tier 1, Tier 3, and the Myrtleford Summer Series as Tier 2. That Council allocates funding to 1 Dinner Plain event funding application, as follows: the Alpine Event Environment Workshop as Tier 2, that Council delegates authority to the Chief Executive Officer to distribute residual or unspent rollover event funds totalling $90,000, and notes a further dinner plane event funding round will open after winter 2023.
Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Kelly, Councillor Janus. Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Just again to reiterate our thanks to all those that applied, and many of these events involve significant volunteer work and community groups collaborating with other agencies to make many of these events what is a great place to live in the Alpine Shire. So my thanks to all those applicants and also to the panel that went through the process to identify successful recommended recipients.
Councillor Janus?
No, nothing.
Nothing? Any other councillors wish to make comment on any of these? Yes, Councillor Hughes.
Just with this happens every year, that we go through this process. It's a fantastic process that is allowing community groups and events to be able to do these types of things. I just really urge people, if you don't apply for it, you're not going to get it. So put in an application for something that you want, you might be awarded it. And I think that we really just need to urge each other and other user groups that might not be in a position to be able to have access to the information of when this is happening, and help each other out and be there together as a community to really get these things happening. I mean, we've got a residual of unspent $90,000, which means that there's community groups that are not getting something because they didn't put in an application. And I think that we just need to rally together to really get people thinking about what it is that they can be applying for and where people can benefit in this, because it's there, it's to be utilised, it's a fantastic process and it's a great asset to have. I just really urge people to pay attention. This happens all the time and you need to be aware of it, and if you're not, then talk to somebody and really get it out there, because I think with a $90,000 unspent rollover, that's a lot. That could be doing a lot for our community. So just put your thinking hats on, please, people.
Well said, I think. Thank you. Any other comments? No. Could I put this to the vote, please? Those in favour of these final recommendations? Thank you. That is carried. Right. 8.2.3, Financial Hardship and Debtor Management Policy. Thank you, Ms Havercroft.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to note that I have amended the minutes to add the word policy into the title as requested earlier. So the purpose of this report is to respond to the 2020 Victorian Government Local Government Rating System Review that recommended councils provide increased and transparent support strategies aimed at assisting ratepayers experiencing financial hardship. So the recommendation this evening is around a new financial hardship policy, but actually it also requires some changes to other policies that are existing but reference our financial hardship policies that we already have and contain within other policies. Namely, the Revenue and Debtor Management Policy and our Rating and Revenue Plan. So this has come about because the Victorian Ombudsman released a report in 2021 that was an investigation into how local councils respond to ratepayers in financial hardship. I suppose it was pleasing to note that of the recommendations they had, we meet most of them. So whilst we're drawing a brand new policy, we're not really creating a brand new wheel. We are bringing together where all of our financial hardships are referenced relating to rates and putting them within a brand new policy. So the Ombudsman report outlines what a good approach to financial hardship policy might look like, and that includes having a policy that sets out the hardship relief options, the eligibility for those options and how to apply. It makes the policy easily accessible online and in hard copy on request. It publishes it in plain English and has accessible formats appropriate to the community, including other languages, videos, easy English. We're working on our communication strategy, which is also part of the Ombudsman recommendation for reaching ratepayers that we believe would be in financial hardship. A piece of work that is carried out each year is to look at, in some detail, who our pensioners are within our community as part of our rates annual rates work, to make sure that we understand if any of those individuals are sitting within our debtors and reaching out to them to see if we can support them in some way financially through the mechanisms that are laid out in this policy or that were subsequently contained in other policies. So as part of the 2020 Local Government Act, many will remember that we put through lots of policies, and one of those included the Revenue and Ratings Plan, which was a long piece of work to determine how our rates should be applied across the municipality, and it established a framework within how council operates its financial hardship and set the tone, really, of how this policy has been written. The former rates, revenue and debtors policy combine both rates and charges and all of our debtors. Hence why we have to, this financial hardship policy only relates to rates, and therefore it's been pulled out and separated from the rates and debtor policy, and that's the name change that forms part of the recommendations. We recognise that there is probably some financial hardship in our community right now, and rates is one place where we will see that pinching and be able to make an assessment about an individual's financial position at that time. It's really important that people who are in any sort of financial hardship contact us about their rates if rates is one of the things that is really causing them significant financial stress. They will be having a completely confidential conversation. I'm pains to make that really clear because people talk, but when it comes to people's confidential financial, people don't talk. It is a confidential meeting to understand how we might be able to support that individual better. And it is around individuals. So the policy doesn't have within its scope commercial businesses, and it doesn't have within its scope properties that are not somebody's principal private residence. So it must be your home that the financial hardship is being applied to.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Seconded, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Janus.
When I read the policy, Ms Havercroft, it said that they encourage people to do it online. If people have difficulty, and I'm thinking of our older citizens often, or disabled, is there room in the system for them to come in and get a hard copy and get assistance to do that in a confidential space?
Thank you, Councillor Janus. There's a couple of routes for anyone. There's an online form. People are able to phone our customer service number and request that a form is sent to them in the post or emailed to them if that's how they prefer to receive it. And we always welcome customers at the customer service desk here at the Bright office, where someone will either help them with the form or hand them a form, but we'll work with whichever works best for that individual to make sure that the information is being shared. Yeah,
I think I'm satisfied with that because we do have an older demographic in certain areas, and we all know that times are getting tighter, as you clearly stated. So there could be some people who, and it's not something you easily talk about, and can be embarrassing for some people who are not in a position to meet their debt, whatever, and they need to have a clear understanding of where all that goes. So, and I knew that we were right up there anyway with our policy, so rather than reinventing the wheel, we're just tightening the spokes a bit.
Councillor Nicholas.
I have a question too. I have been approached by people who are in arrears due to being on a pension and not being able to pay, and it was a while ago now, but they've had concern about paying interest on interest because they're so far behind. And I just wondered how we can manage that under this policy, whether there's, I can see that there's waivers for this and there's waivers for that, but it doesn't look like there's, apart from a payment plan process for people to try to get ahead, and they just seem to be keeping, the person who approached me was just going backwards and backwards.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. So what we don't have yet, and we're anticipating coming out this year, and I'm afraid I can't be more definite than that, is recommendations and guidelines from the state around how we deal with interest in regards a time to pay arrangement, and then how quickly, once we've got a time to pay arrangement in place, how quickly after that is either finished or breached in some way, interest is then applied again. So we're anticipating a whole series of guidelines which this policy won't need any amendment for. It will be just the procedures that sit underneath it that will detail how interest is to be handled, because the penalty interest rate is very high. It's not set by us, it's set by the state. And it was 10%. I imagine in the last budget it probably has gone up again. So it is a hefty amount of interest.
Thank you, Ms Havercroft. That's the question.
Any other comments on these various policies? Yes?
Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Ms Havercroft. I think it's really pleasing to bring these matters into standalone policies. I think it's much neater and also can deal to some of the emotion that can be around these matters. Just picking up on Councillor Nicholas's point, I did scratch my head around the waiver of interest provision in there, and it is quite silent on the approach, because later on, waiver of other areas, particularly rates and charges, are clearly on your shoulders as the Director of Customer and Community. One suggestion I have is that we look to place a hard copy of this new policy in some useful locations, and the first one that springs to mind are the neighbourhood centres. Often they will interact with folk that may benefit from the clarity that we have in this space now. So, yeah, really just a recommendation to have some hard copies placed in our neighbourhood centres. There may be other locations as well, but they're the ones that spring to mind for me.
The libraries is probably the other one. Any other comments, councillors? No? Okay then. Councillor Janus, you have last say?
No.
No? Okay. We have 4 recommendations. I'll put that to the vote, please. Those in favour? Thank you. Carried. 8.2.4, a planning application for a skateboard ramp. Thank you, Ms Havercroft.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So this evening's planning application relates to the informal outdoor recreation skateboard ramp in Camping Park Road, Harrietville. Apologies. So the proposal is to construct a skateboard ramp, and confusingly this evening we're not discussing the amenity around that skateboard ramp. It has an as-of use ability to be there and to be used. We're talking around its construction and how it is being constructed this evening, which will serve to explain why some of the objections that are in here haven't been dealt with through the planning matter, because they're, whilst relevant often within a residential kind of consideration, they're not for the purposes of this because of its use rights that exist already. So I want to get the language absolutely right, just so we're clear. So while the current application triggers a planning permit required to construct a building or construct or carry out works under both the public park and recreation zone and the bushfire management overlay, the proposed use of the land for a skateboard ramp does not trigger a planning permit under the provisions of either of those, the public park and recreation zone or the bushfire management overlay. So when this went out for public exhibition, as is the standard practice, we received letters of support and letters of objection to it. I bring the letters of support, and they're included within the report this evening, because we don't always get letters of support when it comes to planning applications. And so it's nice to share them when they arrive. And they are treated as submissions like objections are, in the same way. So the skateboard ramp was in this location, and it's coming home in many respects. So the proposed skateboard ramp was previously located within the Harriettville Recreation Reserve approximately 20 years ago. The skateboard ramp was moved to Falls Creek, and the current proposal seeks to reinstate it within the reserve. The map that is presented is fairly small, but the proposed location is at the southwest corner of the reserve, so just towards the edge of the oval. Well, actually, hopefully it's off the oval. It's not in the oval. So some of the objections that we did receive that form part of the consideration that we feel would be appropriate to place within conditions are around a code of conduct. So whilst we can't say you have to shut at 6 and someone has to man it, within the Planning Act, we are able to suggest that there's a code of conduct associated with how we might prevent poor amenity to the neighbours of that area, rather than any firmer amenity issues that might arise. And that all stems from its as-use right for the skateboard park itself. So the recommendation this evening is that Council approve a planning permission for the construction of a skateboard ramp in Harriettville.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas and Councillor Kelly. Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Ms Havercroft, for your presentation of the item. I just wanted to say that not only did we get a couple of letters of support for the planning application, but councillors received, I didn't count, but probably over 20 emails of support from various people across, mostly from Harriettville, but also visitors to Harriettville. I've also spoken to a number of local Harriettville families and attended the forum, so listened to proponents and objectors. The forum was held before we understood the as-of-use right. So I think what's in front of us now, with the controls over the building and the way it might be used through a code of conduct, and the understanding that the local families have of how important it is, not just because their kids are going to be there, but because of what it does to people around the site, that it's the way forward. The other thing that I gathered from the people that I spoke to who live in Harriettville and have children who will use this facility is that really no matter where it goes, there are going to be some people who object to it. So having it as of use so that those objections aren't valid under our systems anyway, and us being able to do something in terms of the way it's built so that it minimises impact, I think is the way forward.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I tend to agree with Councillor Nicholas. It was terrific to see the proactive engagement of councillors for the opportunity or with concerns about the project. My conclusion is there's been a lot of collaboration on the perspectives to address some of those concerns and legacy aspects, and the embracement of some new materials and new opportunity here as well. And I think the conditions are well known and have been again collaborated on to come to the best solution they can. So thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think, the objections to this are valid in terms of, the amenity and things like that, as it would be, as Councillor Nicholas said, anywhere it would be placed in Harriettville. The conditions on the permit, I suppose, that we're deciding on are around, code of conduct, alcohol and drug use, littering, music, graffiti, all those types of things, which would have the same effect as the one in Bright, Myrtleford, Mount Beauty as well. We are making the decision based on the permit, as Ms Havercroft has said, but this is a long-standing thing. 20 years of history comes behind this, and I think it's really, this is single-handedly my time in council the most interaction I've had with the community on any topic. And Harriettville's not a very big town, so to think that in perspective, I'm pretty sure it was Harriettville. But it comes with full circle. Some of the people that were behind it 20 years ago are a part of it now. And I think for me, this is an avenue for youth participation and giving them responsibility. But it's not just our youth that's actually utilising this. This is all walks of life for various different reasons. And I think, that's been outlined. The Harrietville Board Riders Association has over 80 members. So in terms of how it's going to be used and the amenity and all of those types of things, I think that the concerns are validated and acknowledged by the Board Riders Association that this is something that they will be keeping a close eye on as well. And I also wanted to reiterate that this is getting people away from screens and the antisocial behaviour and the bullying that goes behind screens as well, and it's getting them outside, it's getting them active and getting them, utilising those outdoor facilities. So for me, I think this is a value add for the community.
Councillor Janus.
Yep. Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for those comments. Just going back a heap of years, I was sort of major applicant in the current Myrtleford skate park in its the existing state of the steel construction, and there was a lot of community concern from neighbours in relation to that, to behaviour, drugs, noise, etc., rubbish, graffiti. But what I found is that a lot of those things didn't occur, and the young people had to work for what they had, and I don't know whether there is a community contribution to all of this, but if they have to contribute something themselves, they will respect it more. And we found that with Mount Beauty, the new updated Myrtleford Park, and I know that the young people in Bright are also fundraising very hard to get some upgrade works done to there. And I've also found it be a generational thing. Some of those people who objected, their children used it, and now their children are actually using it. And it is, occasionally you will have something go wrong no matter where it is. But I think it's a wonderful thing for the youth of Mount Beauty. Harrietville.
And Melbourne.
Good for them over there too. It's good for the young ones. Anyway, they can mix and match over there.
Yep.
But I think it is a positive thing, and there's community ownership of it. So young people and parents have taken ownership of that to ensure that it is running well. There's a great opportunity there for our youth officers to work with the young people as well, to mix with them in their space and to talk to them in their space, and also our local constabulary to work with the youth as well. That's very important to have that connection there. So, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas, any final words? Okay. Let's put this recommendation to the councillors. Those in favour? That's unanimous. We have some happy campers. I note also, just in this one, that the application was received on the 1st of the 7th, 22. So it takes a while, but the process works.
Pretty fast for some things.
All right. Item 9, the informal meetings of councillors. Thank you for attending, folks. Recommendation that the summary of informal meetings of councillors for June, July 23 be received. Mover, Councillor Hughes, and a seconder, Councillor Kelly. Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Presentation of reports by delegates. Item 10, we have none tonight. I'll start with general business from my left. Councillor Prime.
Yeah, just a quick one from me. We're nearing the end of the football netball season, thank goodness. After a cold, wet winter, you do look forward to the end of it, that's for sure. Just quickly, there's only a couple of home games left at Dedderang this year, if you come from my side of the Shire. And they recently had a really successful reunion of the twos and the juniors finals from the early 2000s, which was a great event. So 4 rounds left, 2 home games at Dedderang. So if anyone wants to get out and watch some football, please come on down.
And netball.
Oh, sorry, I am a netballer, so I should plug that. You can even come watch me if you want to. So.
That's all. Women's AFL. I thought you might be playing.
No, I'm not very good with contact.
In the ruck, I would think.
No, I'm strictly a non-contact girl. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Councillor Janus.
None from me.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
2 quick items from myself, please. Just be mindful of the rubbish that is around town. I have noticed a massive increase on people doing the wrong thing. There are Macca's containers being thrown out the window, and we don't live near McDonald's, so it's an hour away at the closest. I tend to take a grabber on my walk sometimes, and I fill up a bag and things like that. Small gestures like this go a long way if we all just take a second to pick up something, and don't throw your rubbish next to a bin, throw it in the bin, little things like that, sorry. The other thing is the Youth Awards are open for nomination, and they close on August the 7th, which is really not that far away. This is, again, one of those things that happens every year, and you can't recognise youth unless they are nominated for it. And I think this is a really fantastic avenue. It has been around for quite some time. Really, really good avenue to be able to look at what it is that our youth can deliver and do deliver in our communities. I think it's really important that they be recognised for that, because as young people growing up in society, they are bound by rules and regulations, probably more so than most of us when it comes to being underage. And I think that they should be commended for the work that they do put into our community, and really inspire them to do it more often and in more abundance too. And if we nominate people, I feel like we can get this bigger and better and more exciting as the years go on. But again, it won't happen unless you nominate. So if there is somebody on your mind, you've seen something happen, you've read something in the newspaper, it might be worth reaching out to somebody just to say, hey, did you know that? There is an avenue that they could get recognised for the work that they've been doing. So August the 7th is not far away. Please put in your applications for that.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. Pick up. Councillor Nicholas.
Here for the Youth Awards. Yep, terrific. I wanted to mention that the ski season's in full swing. It's some of the busiest years that have ever been recorded. So the traffic on the road can be pretty frustrating for those of us who've got somewhere to go. So please try and exhibit courtesy and patience on the roads. And on the slopes as well, we have a councillor out of action because of an unfortunate accident that they're happening all the time. At Hotham, there's been 2 really significant rope rescues and 3 or 4 most days with crampons and ropes because people aren't paying attention to the conditions. So for slope users out there in the community, just be careful and stay within your limits.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Just the one item, we went live with Fogo in July.
We did. I went live today.
Oh, that was...
And I firstly wanted to congratulate the council officers for having that happen on schedule, and you know, certainly the deployment of the equipment and the information. It's, you know, the introduction of new services is always a challenge, and I think this has been a very smooth introduction. So my congratulations. I look forward to getting some preliminary stats on participation and the results there. But I have brought in a prop today, Mayor. I brought in a bread bag because what I've really noticed is that pretty much the only thing that's in my garbage bin now is this sort of stuff. And this one says,
100% recyclable.
This bag is 100% recyclable. Now, I'm not here to dispute that. That may well be true. But when I flip it over on the other side and try to understand how I might do that, it's pretty disappointing for someone in the Alpine Shire, and I suspect everywhere else. You can collect and return this, apparently, according to the manufacturer of this product. And they promote an organisation that went broke a few months ago. And in fact, the ABC News did a report on that today, that the two major supermarket chains are attempting to do something else with this stuff, because the company that they backed to do that has been investigated by the EPA and for illegally stockpiling, and there is no solution at the moment. So I guess my plea is to the supermarket chains, we'll get on with it. And also, if you're the manufacturer of said products that say I'm 100% recyclable, maybe you should deliver on that too. So thank you. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Well, that's good general business.
And you can put tea bags in them now, I'm told. Yes.
Yes. What about the...
couldn't last week, but...
okay, it was to do with the staple, I thought. That was the only thing. It was the staple. The CEO, general business, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I'd like to thank Councillor Kelly for his mention of FOGA. It has indeed been a very significant effort by the team. It's touched all areas of the council, it's touched all areas of the Shire. So, and I was reflecting, in my 7 years, it's the most significant service change that we've implemented. We've now delivered all the bins through our rollout. There are still a few people, strangely the people who are saying they wish they had one and they haven't got one, are contacting council. That's really nice to hear. So if you are sitting out there and you haven't got what you expected, you haven't got a bin in your Dyke one or your bin's broken, please feel free to get in touch with council. We've got a team who's working on that. As of Monday, we will be effectively starting the proper service delivery schedule. So we have been running a red bin collection through the last few weeks while we completed the rollout, but as of Monday next week, we're into the full schedule. So you can find the details on our website. We'll make it as easy as we can to be able to find out, to put in your address and find out where your bins are, what the time frame is for picking up your bins. So that's great. Second one I'd like to note, the last couple of weeks we've had a community meeting after our council briefing with a couple of community groups, and my sense is it's gone really well. It's provided an opportunity outside of a formal council meeting for members of the community to come in and have a conversation with us about various aspects of the Bright Valley development which have interested them. We're working on the details, but we're based on the success of those meetings, we're planning to roll out a schedule or a sequence of those meetings, possibly through August. We will communicate, but perhaps 8th of August we'll be looking at inviting people in, people who are interested. We'll likely ask people to register so that we're not inundated, but we'll provide an opportunity for anyone who's interested to come in and share the questions in a slightly less formal setting where we can actually have a bit of a conversation rather than limiting people to 2 questions and a formal response. So we'll roll that out through August. I think that was well received by the groups that attended. Final one from me, I'd like to acknowledge my brother who's in the audience today, Sam, he's flown all the way from Congo. I was expecting a question on notice on the Great Alpine Road trees, but he spared me that one. So thank you, Sam. And yeah, I'd like to welcome you to the Alpine Shire and hope you've enjoyed your first meeting. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Does that actually indicate that there may be a second meeting? Possibly. All right. I'll just like to pick up on one thing, and that is what Councillor Hughes was saying about rubbish, picking up McDonald's, shouldn't name them, picking up rubbish that has been generated outside the Shire. When we get visitors, and if you're talking to any visitors, I would really like you to probably talk to them along the lines and see if you can get them to recognise the fact that they're temporary residents. They're not tourists, they're temporary residents, and treat this place as though they are a resident, and then that would be a lot nicer for everybody, including themselves. That's my only bit of general business. Item 12, motions for which notice has been previously given. We have none. Receptions of reading and petitions. We have none. Item 14, documents for sealing. We now have 6 so moved. Councillor Kelly and seconded Councillor Janus. Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. At this point, I am going to close the meeting to the public. We have a confidential report which councillors need to talk. I thank you very much for sticking through. What are we up to? 7:10, so two and a bit hours. So thank you. Thanks very much, Sam. Good. Have we still got to do this online?
No.
No? No.